Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal as the turbulent undercurrents of General Hospital continue to swell beneath the surface of an already volatile narrative, the fate of Cody edges ever closer to a shadowed, irreversible horizon. In a stunning revelation that shook the soap opera's devoted fanbase, actor Josh Kelly confirmed the official expiration of his contract with the show, a statement that, while factual, left a haunting silence where certainty should have been. With no definitive declaration about his continued presence on the canvas of Port Charles, speculation exploded like wildfire. The air thickened with rumors, industry whispers, and backstage leaks, all painting an ominous portrait of what lay ahead for the character who had long teetered between redemption and ruin. The timing was no coincidence. Cody's storyline, once on a gentle upward trajectory with the promise of romantic stability alongside Molly, took a sudden and bewildering turn. Manipulated by Christina to seduce Ava and sabotage Rick's fragile relationship, Cody's actions spiraled into chaos. The shift was jarring, the pace of destruction relentless, as if the writers themselves were orchestrating an accelerated unraveling, a narrative sprint toward a tragic, irreversible climax. Every facet of Cody's identity, his volatility, his impulsive nature, his deeply buried goodness, was being compacted into what now appears to be a singular, defining moment. Not one of disgrace, not of cowardice, but of selfless, unflinching bravery. It was as if the chaos that had once surrounded him was finally about to be silenced by an act so pure, so raw, it would burn itself into the legacy of Port Charles. And that moment came, not with ceremony or foreshadowing, but with the violence of a single gunshot, echoing through a holy space meant for joy and rebirth. The day of Daisy's baptism had been intended to unite families, to wrap Port Charles in the light of innocence and sacred tradition. Instead, it descended into calamity. Sonny, still reeling from recent assassination attempts and the looming threat of legal retaliation, was already in a precarious position. His presence at the event brought tension, expectation, and the weight of unfinished vendettas. But no one, not even the most seasoned survivor of Port Charles's bloody history, anticipated the horror that would unfold. In the split second that followed the crack of gunfire, panic rippled through the gathered crowd like a seismic wave. Time seemed to fracture. Eyes darted towards Sonny, expecting him to be the target. But it was Cody who reacted, not with hesitation, not with fear, but with instinctual, ferocious determination. His body became a shield, his purpose crystallized in a single heartbeat. He surged forward, placing himself between Sasha and death, as though every misstep, every poor decision of his past, had been leading to this one redemptive act. The bullet, cold and indifferent, struck Cody instead. It tore through flesh and bone, through the complexities of a man misunderstood by so many, and carved into him a final testament. One of sacrifice. One of love. Sasha collapsed beside him, her hands trembling as she cradled the man who had silently protected her, who had stood at the edges of her life like a quiet guardian. There had never been grand declarations, no sweeping gestures of affection. Yet in the end, Cody's love, be it romantic, platonic or something even more profound, spoke with greater clarity than any words could. Blood pooled on the marble floor beneath the altar, turning the baptismal ceremony into a tableau of loss and martyrdom. The sacred and the tragic merged into one unforgettable image. Gasps and sobs erupted around them. Jason, Carly, Sonny, all frozen, all helpless. In those paralyzed seconds, Cody Bell, the man who had been dismissed, underestimated, and pushed to the periphery, became the undeniable center of everything. Not because he sought the spotlight, but because he chose to step into danger so someone else wouldn't have to. Outside the walls of the church, the world kept spinning, unaware that Port Charles had just lost a soul who finally found clarity and courage at the very moment his light was extinguished. Online, fans reacted with a torrent of grief and admiration. Hashtags memorializing Cody trended within hours, tributes pouring in from viewers who once questioned his motives but now saw the layers of his journey with new eyes. The complexity of his character. The reckless flirtation with darkness, the unexpected moments of tenderness, the ultimately unshakable moral core, was now viewed through the lens of finality. A misunderstood man had become a legend. For Josh Kelly, whose performance breathed nuance and authenticity into Cody Bell, the uncertainty surrounding his future on General Hospital only intensified the emotional impact of this storyline. The actor had not clarified whether he intended to return or disappear from the soap landscape altogether, and perhaps that ambiguity was part of the heartbreak. Cody's exit was not just a character leaving town or fading quietly into narrative irrelevance. It was a spectacular, searing farewell, one that forced audiences to grapple with the fragility of redemption and the haunting truth that some sacrifices come too late for apologies, but just in time to save a life. In death, Cody accomplished what he could not in life. He became the man he always wanted to be, not just for himself, but for those he cared about. If this is indeed the last chapter of Cody Bell's time in Port Charles, it is one written in bold strokes, unflinching in its emotional intensity and artistic risk. It leaves behind a scar, a silence, and a story that will echo long after the stained glass windows stop glowing with candlelight. And should Josh Kelly one day return, in memory, vision, or miracle resurrection as soap operas often permit, the path will be paved by the legacy he left behind. A legacy not of chaos, but of courage. Not of scandal, but of salvation. Cody Bell died as he lived, flawed, defiant, unpredictable. But in the end, he chose honor. And that, above all else, is how he will be remembered. When the piercing scream tore through the air and the sacred silence of the church was shattered by the violence of a single moment, everything stopped. The glistening marble floor, once adorned for celebration, was now streaked with blood, staining the very foundation of what was meant to be a day of love and new beginnings. Time froze as eyes locked onto the motionless figure lying in Sasha's arms. Cody, the man who once wandered through the shadows of Port Charles, misunderstood, underestimated, and often condemned, now lay lifeless in an act of unmistakable heroism. His fall wasn't merely physical, it was spiritual, an offering, a final surrender not to weakness but to redemption. For a man who had lived much of his life on the periphery, dancing between legality and chaos, identity and confusion, his death was neither meaningless nor tragic in the conventional sense. It was, in fact, purposeful. It was the end he may never have envisioned for himself, but one that brought closure to a life marked by contradiction. As Sasha collapsed beside him, her tears falling freely onto the blood-soaked fabric of his shirt, the weight of Cody's sacrifice became unbearably clear. This wasn't just a man dying, it was a soul atoning. Cody had lived with the scars of his own mistakes, mistakes that had cost him trust, love, and respect. He had, time and again, found himself isolated, the subject of gossip and derision. Yet, in his final act, he didn't cry out for validation. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't utter a word. He let the truth of his actions speak for him. In choosing to take the bullet meant for someone else, Cody reclaimed a dignity that had so often been denied him. He didn't wait for the world to decide whether he was worthy of grace, he defined it himself in a flash of instinct and valor. In that defining instant, Cody became the man he had always hoped to be, even if only for a fleeting moment before the light left his eyes. For those who had ridiculed him, judged him harshly, and dismissed his potential, Cody's sacrifice was an undeniable reckoning. It was a searing rebuke to the belief that people don't change, that those once lost are forever so. To see him, broken yet brave, bleeding out in the heart of a church, was to be confronted with the brutal, beautiful truth. Redemption is real, and it often arrives when least expected. Those who had scoffed at Cody's attempts to rebuild his life now had to live with the memory of a man who, when it mattered most, chose to stand between life and death, not for glory, not for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. For them, his final breath was a silent but resounding scream that shattered every cynical assumption they had once held. And for those who had always believed in him, those few souls who had seen past his rough edges and into the quiet ache of his longing to belong, Cody's sacrifice was a devastating validation. It was a confirmation, soaked in tears and blood, that they had not misplaced their faith. Every small moment of kindness they had shown him, every second chance they had offered, now shone brighter than ever in the reflection of his heroism. For Sasha, his final gesture was more than protection. It was an expression of unspoken love, of unwavering loyalty. In shielding her with his life, Cody gave her more than survival. He gave her clarity, purpose, and perhaps the beginning of a healing she never thought possible. Cody didn't die asking for redemption, he died proving he deserved it. In a world like Port Charles, where so many wear masks and motives are always layered in deceit, Cody's final act was pure. There was no agenda, no manipulation, no expectation. Only sacrifice. And in that purity, he transcended the reputation that had weighed him down for so long. His death was not the extinguishing of a troubled flame, but the brilliant flare of a soul finally at peace. His name, once whispered with suspicion and ridicule, would now echo in reverence. His legacy, forged not by perfect choices but by an imperfect heart choosing courage, would live on in those he left behind. In the end, Cody's journey wasn't about falling from grace. It was about climbing back toward it, scarred and flawed but never fully broken. His life was messy, painful, unpredictable. But his death? It was honorable. It was necessary. It was everything he had never been allowed to be, until that final, fateful moment when the world stood still, and Cody Bell proved, once and for all, that he was more than the sum of his past. He was a man of heart. A man of bravery. A man who died not as a victim, but as a hero. Across social media platforms, from sprawling forums to intimate fan pages dedicated to General Hospital, an emotional tidal wave surged as news of Cody Bell's death reached viewers. Grief, disbelief, and reverent admiration flooded comment sections, painting a mosaic of collective mourning. Though the showrunners had yet to release an official statement regarding Josh Kelly's permanent departure from the long-running series, the on-screen demise of his character struck with such emotional resonance that fans instinctively understood they had just witnessed the end of something profound. Cody's final moments weren't just a scripted farewell, they felt real, like the sudden loss of someone familiar, flawed, and deeply human. In the days that followed the airing of that fateful episode, fans took to their keyboards, pouring their hearts into tributes that read like letters to a fallen friend. They wrote in trembling words, as if still in shock, calling Cody a hero, not the kind born of glory and perfection, but one forged through pain, redemption, and a desperate desire to do what was right when it mattered most. Many acknowledged his journey as one of the most raw and honest character arcs in recent memory. Cody, the man who had stumbled more times than he stood tall, became a symbol of the very human struggle for second chances. He had been judged, misunderstood, even discarded by some characters in Port Charles and viewers alike. And yet, in the end, he rose above the wreckage of his past to make the ultimate sacrifice. That act of bravery, of selflessness, elevated him not just in the story, but in the hearts of those who watched. To them, he was the broken man who finally put the pieces back together, not for recognition, but to save someone else. It was that quiet, painful transformation that made Cody's death not just tragic, but unforgettable. Fan artists began sharing illustrated tributes of Cody standing beneath the stained glass windows of the church, bathed in celestial light, while others crafted video montages of his most powerful scenes, accompanied by songs that captured the heartbreak and nobility of his exit. Hashtags like #FarewellCody, #JoshKellyForever, and #GHHero trended for days. Some fans recalled the earliest days of Cody's arrival on the show, when he was just another face with a murky backstory. Never imagining he would become the emotional core of such a shattering storyline. Others wrote about how Cody's struggles mirrored their own experiences with failure, forgiveness, and the search for belonging. In him, they found a reflection of themselves. His courage reminded them that even those who fall hardest are capable of rising with dignity. Yet alongside their sorrow for the fictional loss, fans also extended their deepest gratitude and admiration to Josh Kelly himself. The actor had not simply played Cody, he had embodied him with such sincerity, nuance, and emotional precision that viewers often forgot where the performance ended and the person began. There was an authenticity to Kelly's portrayal that made every conflicted choice, every desperate look, every rare smile feel earned. His work wasn't loud or showy, it was layered, introspective, and quietly devastating. Through him, Cody wasn't just a soap opera character. He was a man worth rooting for, crying for, and ultimately mourning. Messages poured in wishing Kelly continued success in his career, with fans urging casting directors across the industry to recognize the quiet brilliance he brought to daytime television. Others hoped he would find peace and fulfillment in his next chapter, whether on screen or off, insisting that his portrayal of Cody had changed how they viewed not only fictional redemption, but their own capacity for growth and grace. They spoke of his legacy, not in terms of ratings or screen time, but in the emotional footprint he had left behind. In a genre often dominated by outlandish twists and endless returns, Cody's story stood apart as something tragically permanent, heartbreakingly final. And Josh Kelly's performance ensured it would not be forgotten. For many fans, this moment marked the close of a chapter that would echo for years to come. Cody Bell's sacrifice, and Josh Kelly's haunting portrayal of it, became one of those rare intersections in soap history where fiction brushes against something real and soul-stirring. As the final scenes replayed in the minds of loyal viewers, they understood that a character was gone, but something deeper had been left behind. A memory, a message, a reminder that even in a town like Port Charles, where chaos is constant and resurrection is never far off, some stories end not with noise, but with meaning. And in that silence that follows the hero's fall, the audience does not forget. They remember. They honor. And they thank the man who gave life to a legend. In the heart of Port Charles, a town known for its entanglement of betrayals, alliances, and the ever-present clash between love and vengeance, there now exists an unspoken void, one that cannot be filled by the chaos of new scandals or the arrival of new faces. Cody Bell is gone, and with him, a quiet but deeply resonant presence has vanished from the fabric of the community. His departure wasn't that of a larger-than-life hero or a celebrated patriarch, but it was no less significant. It was, in fact, perhaps more profound precisely because of its imperfection. Cody was never meant to be the flawless savior. He was messy, inconsistent, sometimes misguided, and often tormented by his past and the weight of choices that blurred the line between right and wrong. Yet, it was those very contradictions that made his final act not only symbolic, but unforgettable. Cody's journey was marked by a tug-of-war between redemption and temptation. He didn't always choose wisely. His involvement in Christina's manipulation of Ava and Rick, his flirtations with deception, and his tangled attempts at romance with Molly all painted him as a man who was, at best, morally ambiguous. But Port Charles is no stranger to broken men seeking a second chance. And Cody, for all his flaws, never stopped seeking one. He didn't want to be a saint, he wanted to be better. And when that chance came, not in the form of forgiveness or romance, but in the brutal urgency of a gunshot, Cody chose not to run, not to falter, but to shield. In that final act, he transcended his own history, rewriting it with his blood. The echoes of that moment still ring through the corridors of General Hospital, through the dark alleys and sunlit docks of Port Charles. His death was not one of spectacle, but of substance. It was a reminder that even the most unlikely souls carry within them the capacity for change. That redemption isn't reserved for the pure, but is most potent when claimed by the fallen. Cody, once seen as a side character in the greater drama of the Corinthos dynasty or the tangled legal sagas of the Davis family, became the center of a story that forced everyone, characters and viewers alike, to pause and reflect on their assumptions. He became proof that the most overlooked individuals often hold the greatest power to impact the world around them, not through grand declarations, but through decisive, selfless action. As the bells of the church tolled in mournful cadence and candlelight danced against the stained glass windows, Cody Bell departed this world not in disgrace, but in quiet triumph. He didn't need fanfare. He didn't need applause. He simply needed that final moment. A choice made in clarity, a sacrifice offered in silence, to complete the journey that so many had believed would end in disappointment. The stillness of his death was not empty, it was full of meaning. And it has settled into the memory of Port Charles like a permanent scar, tender, painful, but ultimately sacred. If this is truly the final punctuation mark in Cody's narrative, then it is not merely a period, it is a bold, unwavering statement. His death will not be another line in the ever-evolving script of General Hospital to be forgotten amidst the noise of new plot twists. It is etched deeply into the legacy of the show as one of its most quietly devastating and emotionally transformative moments. Viewers will remember not only how Cody died, but why he died. They will remember the vulnerability in his eyes, the fire in his final act, and the silence that followed, one that spoke louder than any monologue or confession.